Hey guys, tonight we're stepping back into a world before Halloween existed. Before plastic pumpkins, before candy corn, before anyone even thought about carving a goofy grin into a gourd. You're walking into the chill of a forgotten autumn night, the kind where the air smells like wood smoke and damp earth. Somewhere in the darkness, drums pulse and sparks leap toward the stars. It's not Halloween yet. It's something older, rougher, and stranger. And you probably wouldn't survive this one without at least a warm cloak and a strong stomach. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while you're here, drop your location and your local time in the comments. I love seeing where in the world you're listening from. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You trudge through tall, rustling grass toward a ring of orange light. Smoke stings your nose, and laughter breaks through the crackle of fire. The people around it wear furs, leather, and wreaths of oak leaves. This is centuries before anyone ever uttered the word Halloween. Tonight, they're celebrating the seasons turning, the death of summer, and the birth of winter. You can almost taste the tension in the air, the relief of harvest done, the fear of what comes next. Someone tosses a branch into the flames, shouting something in a language you can't understand, and everyone cheers. The fire isn't just for warmth, it's protection. These Iron Age villagers believe the line between the living and the dead thins tonight. Spirits might wander out of the dark looking for warmth too. So they make the bonfire a beacon, a kind of cosmic porch light for friendly ghosts, and a warning to anything nastier. Historians still argue whether these early fires were meant to honor ancestors or scare them off. Maybe both. Dual purposes fit the human mood perfectly. Gratitude mixed with anxiety. You thank the dead for their help, but also, quietly, beg them not to stick around. The smell of roasting grain drifts from a clay pot nearby. Someone hands you a piece of bread, dense, smoky, and still warm. You chew slowly while they tell you stories of the sun's yearly death. Every spark from the fire, they say, is a fragment of the dying sun, scattered to help light the coming months. A child throws a handful of herbs into the blaze, and a sharp, sweet smell fills the night. Juniper, maybe, or mugwort. The people nod approvingly. They believe the smoke carries prayers upward. Later, the village will take torches lit from this sacred fire back to each home, rekindling hearths that had been extinguished earlier that day. It's both symbolic and practical, religion and heating system neatly combined. You notice that no one looks particularly frightened, even though they're surrounded by tales of spirits and omens. There's laughter, flirting, dancing, the kind of celebration that feels like relief more than dread. After months of hard work, they're finally allowed to rest, eat, and sing before the long dark settles in. A man in a horned headdress steps forward, raising a carved wooden staff. He chants something low and rhythmic, his voice blending with the wind. Around you, people fall silent. You realize this firelight ritual is the heartbeat of the community. Part feast, part funeral, part insurance policy against winter's cruelty. And oddly, you feel it working. Even from across centuries, the rhythm seeps into your bones. It's comforting in its simplicity. Gather, burn, eat, survive. You can almost sense how this primal structure will echo down through time, eventually shaping the bonfires and candles of every autumn celebration that follows. Off to the side, a group of teenagers, yes, even in the Iron Age there were teenagers, are daring each other to jump through the fire's edges. Supposedly it brings luck, or fertility, or just a good story to brag about later. You watch one boy nearly singe his tunic, stumble, then grin as the crowd roars approval. Humans haven't changed much. We still chase danger for entertainment, even when we pretend it's about tradition. As the night deepens, embers float up, like tiny orange stars, vanishing into the black. You find yourself staring into the fire, the way people always do when words aren't enough. There's something hypnotic about it, alive, but also dying. It reminds you of the year itself, bright, fleeting, fading. Someone beside you murmurs that the fire's spirit must be kept awake all night or misfortune will visit the village. A few people nod, stoking the flames, feeding it with dry wood. You wonder if they're protecting themselves from cold or from chaos. Probably both. The line between superstition and survival is razor thin here. You stretch your hands towards the warmth, feeling the pulse of heat, the drum beats, the smell of burning oak. The first frost of winter is only days away, and the villagers know it. This fire is their declaration. We see the dark coming, and we are not afraid. Tomorrow, the ashes will be scattered in the fields for luck, and months from now, when the sun returns, they'll tell stories about this night. The laughter, the near burns, the strange shapes that danced in the smoke. Someone will swear they saw a figure beyond the firelight, half in shadow, watching. No one will admit to being afraid, but everyone will keep their torches closer next year. You glance around the clearing one last time, the firelight painting every face in gold. The music softens. The year dies quietly, and the world holds its breath. The next evening, you're walking through a mist-soaked valley somewhere in ancient Ireland. The hills roll like sleeping beasts, and the grass gleams silver in the moonlight. The fire festival is over, but the feeling of something shifting still hangs in the air. You can sense it in your chest, an invisible doorway creaking open between the living and the dead. This is Samhain, the Celtic festival marking summer's end. You can pronounce it Samhain, though most people never get it right. The name itself means summer's end, but to the people gathered around you, it means far more. To them, Samhain is the year's midnight, the moment the world pauses between life and death, warmth and frost, order and chaos. The night feels alive. Cows low nervously in their pens, dogs whimper, and distant torches flicker like fireflies across the dark. You hear whispers about doors opening, not in houses, but in realms. The Druids say that tonight the other world lies so close that you could stumble into it by accident if you're not careful. So you keep close to the firelight. You're invited into a ring of villagers sitting around a low blaze, faces glowing orange against the dark. They're sharing food, pouring ale, and tossing bits of bread into the flames. For those who can't join us, someone murmurs. You realize it's an offering to the dead, a kind of ancient save-a-seat-for gesture for relatives long gone. A woman beside you places an extra stool near the fire, muttering that her brother might visit tonight. No one mocks her. In fact, everyone nods. On Samhain, the boundary between life and death is a polite fiction. The dead are expected guests. You watch as they pass around bowls of roasted turnips and venison stew.
The smell is heavy and comforting. Every bite feels like a shield against winter. Somewhere nearby, a druid chants over a cauldron, dropping herbs that hiss as they hit the hot broth. The steam smells faintly of sage and something wilder, maybe foxglove. Historians still argue whether Samhain was purely spiritual or also practical, more harvest calendar than haunted night. The evidence blurs the line. There's record of cattle being moved to winter pastures, of debts being settled before the cold, of tribes meeting to trade goods and gossip. Yet behind all that business, there's still this eerie undertone, the sense that the world itself is exhaling its last warm breath. You can almost feel the spirits moving through the mist, not hostile, but curious. They drift through the village like smoke, brushing against living skin. A child giggles suddenly and points to an empty space. No one tells him he's wrong. They just throw another log on the fire. One man, already deep into his ale, decides to test the boundary. He slips out into the darkness with a lantern, muttering that he'll find the spirits and offer them a drink. The others laugh, but keep their eyes on the shadows until he returns. When he finally does, the lantern's flame burns blue instead of yellow. Everyone goes quiet. Someone whispers, "They accepted." Then, in perfect human fashion, they pour him another drink. That little incident sparks talk of omens. A woman says she saw a ghostly horse galloping near the hills. Another claims that if you leave your front door open, a lost soul might wander in and bless your house or curse it, depending on their mood. The crowd listens half seriously, half for the thrill. Fear and fascination are twin threads, and Samhain braids them tightly together. Somewhere behind the laughter, you hear faint pipes playing. Not loud, not festive, just soft, mournful notes floating through the dark. The villagers tilt their heads listening. "That's them," someone says quietly. "The fair ones, the AOC." The fair folk, ancient spirits of nature, older than any god. If they like you, they bring fortune. If not, well, let's just say you'll have a very short winter. You look toward the sound, but the mist swallows everything beyond 10 steps. The air is thick, electric. You realize why they wear disguises tonight. Not to scare each other, but to fool whatever walks among them. A wolf mask, a ragged cloak, a smear of ash across the face. If the spirits can't recognize you, they can't steal you away. That's the origin of costume. And you thought your last-minute Halloween mask from the dollar store had power. The night deepens. The fires burn lower, and one by one, people drift toward their huts. A few leave offerings by the threshold. Cups of milk, bits of bread, a handful of grain. You do the same. The gesture feels strangely natural, like shaking hands with the unseen. Before you turn in, an old woman tells you a story. Her voice is cracked, but steady. She says that long ago, when the first Samhain fires burned, the world was smaller, and the gods still walked the hills. One year, the veil didn't close properly, and the dead stayed too long. Crops failed, people vanished, and even the rivers turned black. Since then, she says, the fires have been lit every autumn to remind the dead to go home. It's just manners, she adds with a shrug. You laugh softly, and she smiles back, her wrinkles glowing in the firelight. For all the eerie tension of the night, there's something beautiful about it, a shared understanding that fear, memory, and love can live in the same space. As you lie down on a straw mat inside a smoky hut, you hear the wind sighing outside. It sounds almost like whispering voices. You close your eyes, wondering if they're thanking you for the bread or asking for more.
The mist lifts, and when you open your eyes, the air smells like wine and ripe apples instead of smoke and earth. The world has shifted again, forward this time, to the age of the Roman Empire. You find yourself walking through a courtyard drenched in gold sunlight, where laughter ripples through the vines. Gone are the Druids and their solemn fires. These people celebrate autumn with style, flirtation, and way too much alcohol. You've landed in the middle of Pomorna's feast, the Roman harvest festival honoring the goddess of fruit and abundance. Her symbols? Apples, baskets, and cornucopias bursting with produce. Basically the universe's first farmer's market, but with toga parties and light moral chaos. You wander among tables covered in figs, roasted chestnuts, and honey cakes. Slaves pour mulled wine into bronze cups, and someone strums a lyre in the corner. The sound mingles with the chatter of merchants boasting about their crops and poets reciting terrible verses about how love ripens like an apple. You try not to laugh, but a young woman beside you snorts into her drink, so you're not alone. A statue of Pomorna watches over the crowd, her stone arms full of fruit. Her face is serene, almost smug, as if she knows everyone here is tipsy in her honor. People place apples and pears at her feet, whispering wishes for next year's harvest or for romance, depending on their priorities. Historians still argue whether Pomorna's festival influenced later autumn celebrations, especially Halloween. The timing fits neatly, late October or early November, but the tone couldn't be more different. Samhain was about death and the thinning veil. Pomona's feast is about life, sweetness, and new beginnings. Still, both share a fascination with transitions, the turning of seasons, the uncertainty of what comes next. You stroll toward a group of young Romans gathered around a marble fountain. They're laughing, cheering, dropping apples into the water. One man plunges his face in, trying to grab a floating apple with his teeth. The others howl with amusement. You blink. Wait, that's apple bobbing. Centuries before suburban Halloween parties, here it is in its original, wine-soaked form. The game, it turns out, wasn't just for fun. It was flirtation. Each apple carried a carved mark representing someone's secret admirer. If you caught the right one, it meant fate, or at least a good excuse for another drink. You're offered a turn. The crowd chants encouragingly, and you kneel beside the fountain, face hovering over the cool surface. The water ripples with apple skins glistening like tiny suns. You lunge, miss, sputter, and earn applause anyway. Ancient Rome loves a good show. Later, you find yourself seated beneath an olive tree, listening to two older men debate the season's omens. One insists that a sudden frost means Jupiter is displeased. The other believes it simply means Jupiter forgot his cloak. The argument grows philosophical, then ridiculous, until both men burst out laughing. The Romans had a talent for treating superstition and skepticism as dinner companions, never enemies. Somewhere, a troupe of masked dancers performs a slow, hypnotic routine. The masks resemble rustic spirits, half human, half animal, with long noses and painted eyes. The audience cheers and throws grapes. The performers bow dramatically, their masks gleaming in the torchlight. You realize this playful spirit of disguise, this urge to mix the human and the divine, will echo centuries later in every Halloween costume. Still, not everything here is as carefree as it looks. In the shadows behind the garden, a priest of Pomorna murmurs a quieter ritual. He sprinkles wine onto the ground, thanking the goddess for fertility and pleading that the orchards survive winter's chill. The act feels intimate, almost fearful.
you recognize the same human heartbeat that pulsed beneath Samhain's fires, gratitude and worry woven together. As the afternoon deepens, musicians switch to slower tunes. The wine keeps flowing, and conversation drifts toward storytelling. Someone tells of spirits that guard the orchards, called larvae, not worms, but restless ghosts of the unburied. The listeners laugh nervously. Another man jokes that he once saw one shaking an olive tree for fun. Yet when a cold breeze sweeps across the courtyard, everyone falls silent for a beat. Even among these cheerful Romans, the idea of unseen visitors lingers. You take a sip of spiced wine, warm, sweet, heavy with cinnamon. The taste is oddly comforting. The festival blurs the line between indulgence and reverence, between pleasure and fear of loss. It's a toast to survival wrapped in flirtation and fruit. A woman beside you plucks an apple from the table and rolls it in her palm. She says, "You know, they say if you peel an apple in one unbroken strip, toss it over your shoulder, it'll land in the shape of your lover's first initial." You smile. Of course, you've heard that one. It survived centuries, migrating into folklore and Halloween sleepovers worldwide. She grins, seeing your recognition. "Old tricks never die," she says, and bites the apple. The sun begins to set. Gold light spills across the courtyard, painting everyone in a warm, honey glow. The laughter grows hazy. Someone starts singing about autumn's end, and others join in, their voices weaving into a bittersweet harmony. You tilt your head back, watching leaves drift down like lazy confetti. The air is sweet and heavy, filled with the scent of wine, fruit, and the faint ache of things ending. Pomorna's festival isn't about fear, it's about gratitude for sweetness while it lasts. Still, beneath all the joy, there's an unspoken truth. The fruit is ripest right before it begins to rot. As the last light fades, you realize that in every era, autumn's festivals share the same heartbeat. The Celts, the Romans, the farmers, the city folk, they all gather to face the same truth that beauty is fleeting, warmth is temporary, and the best response is to light a fire, share a drink, and laugh together in the dark.
The laughter of Rome fades like embers in the wind, and when you open your eyes again, you're standing in silence. The air smells of damp stone and olive oil, and the only light comes from rows of small, flickering lamps. You've wandered into an Etruscan necropolis, a city of the dead, but one that feels strangely alive tonight. Stone tombs rise around you like houses, carved with doorways and columns. Families are gathering in the narrow streets between them, carrying baskets of food, wine, and flowers. It's late autumn, and this is their feast of the dead, a night to dine with ancestors who, they believe, still linger nearby. The living and the dead sharing dinner under the same stars. Cozy in a haunting sort of way. Someone waves you over to join their family on a blanket spread across the tomb's threshold. You sit carefully, trying not to step on any carved inscriptions. The father pours wine into a small clay cup, takes a sip, then tips a few drops onto the stone beside him. You watch the dark liquid run into the cracks, vanishing into the tomb. "For them," he says softly, "they drink first." You nod, and he smiles as though you've just understood something ancient and important. Platters appear, roasted lamb, figs, loaves of bread, honeyed cheese. Children giggle as they sneak extra fruit, and the older ones roll their eyes like teenagers have done since the dawn of civilization. It feels more like a family picnic than a funeral rite. But every now and then, someone glances toward the tomb doors as if expecting someone to step through. Historians still argue whether this custom was purely spiritual or also social, a yearly reunion with both ancestors and neighbors. Inscriptions suggest the Etruscans viewed death as a kind of continued residence. The afterlife wasn't far away, just underground. The dead could still see, hear, and occasionally join the living, provided they were fed and remembered. The Etruscans weren't a gloomy people. Their art shows smiling banquets, dancers, musicians, even jokes scratched into walls. Death, to them, wasn't an ending. It was an invitation to stay in touch. You can't help but think how modern we've become in forgetting that. These people celebrated death as another phase of community life. You chew your bread thoughtfully, feeling both comforted and vaguely guilty for ever skipping a family reunion. Nearby, a group of youths performs a slow, rhythmic dance between the tombs, holding torches that paint looping trails of orange across the dark. The dance is for Vanth, the winged goddess who guides souls through the underworld. She's not a figure of terror, but of transition, part guardian, part usher. If you squint, you almost see her in the shadows, wings half-folded, eyes patient. A boy beside you whispers that sometimes Vanth visits these feasts in disguise. If she eats your bread, he says solemnly, you'll have good harvests next year. Then he grins, snatches a fig from the platter, and adds, "Guess that means I'm lucky." You can't help laughing. The older woman hosting the meal tells you that each lamp you see burning in the necropolis represents a different family. Some will burn all night, ensuring their ancestors can find their way back before dawn. If one goes out too soon, it's taken as a sign that the dead are displeased, or perhaps too comfortable to leave. Either way, the living make note. The conversation drifts between gossip and mythology, as easy as breathing. Someone mentioned a nobleman who claimed to see his great-grandfather appear beside the wine jars one year. He just sat there, nodding, didn't say a word. But that winter, the man's crops survived the frost. The others hum thoughtfully, half believing, half teasing. You tilt your head back and notice that above the necropolis the stars look impossibly sharp, like the heavens themselves are part of the audience. The families eat, sing, and laugh until late into the night. Occasionally, someone places a morsel of food or a sip of drink near the tomb's mouth. The gesture is repeated with such casual reverence that you begin to see the pattern. To remember the dead isn't sadness, it's maintenance. Keep the bond warm, keep the stories alive, and maybe, just maybe, they'll keep an eye on you when the world gets cold. Toward the midnight, a quiet settles. The lamps burn lower, their light soft and amber. Someone begins humming, a tune without words. Others join, one by one, until the necropolis hums like a hive. You feel it in your chest, a resonance that connects every person, every grave, every unseen presence. It's haunting, yes, but also heartbreakingly gentle. You think about how modern people shudder at cemeteries, avoiding them unless absolutely necessary. Yet here, they're gathering grounds,
places of warmth and memory. It's strange how easily we forget that death once sat at the same table as life. As you stand to leave, you glance back at the flickering lamps. One suddenly flares brighter, just for a heartbeat. A gust of wind follows, swirling leaves across the stone. The father of the family notices and murmurs, "They're happy tonight." He doesn't explain further, and you don't ask. Some mysteries work best when they stay softly glowing at the edge of reason. You walk away through the lantern-lit paths, the night air cool on your skin. Behind you, the faint laughter continues, and for a moment you could swear it blends with other voices, older, fainter, carried on the wind. The feast of the dead fades into darkness, but the feeling stays, an ancient comfort, knowing that remembrance itself can be an act of love.
The laughter fades into the low hum of wind through pine trees. When you open your eyes, you're standing at the edge of a clearing deep in the northern forests, somewhere in early medieval Europe, long before maps had borders. The air smells of sap and cold soil. It's twilight again, that familiar hour when daylight trembles before slipping away. Ahead of you, villagers move about with hurried energy. They drag fallen branches, pile them high, and smear their hands with soot and resin. This is the Germanic Autumn Fire, a festival that marks the death of the harvest and the first breath of winter. It's part ritual, part necessity, and part therapy for people who've spent months fighting the land for survival. You watch them at work, men splitting logs, women scattering salt in wide circles around the pyre, children carrying bundles of dry twigs. No pumpkins, no saints, just smoke, sweat, and superstition. The sun slips behind the trees, and in the dimness, you notice how carefully they arrange the pile. The fire has to face east, toward the rising sun, so that its ashes carry renewal rather than ruin. At least, that's what the old man muttering prayers insists. When the last log lands on the heap, the crowd steps back. A woman dressed in dark wool steps forward, clearly someone of importance. She raises a carved wooden idol, weathered smooth from years of handling. It's Woden, god of wisdom, war, and winter's storms. His one painted eye glints in the firelight. The woman murmurs a chant in Old Saxon, her voice low and rhythmic, like wind in the branches. The torches are lit one by one. You feel the heat even before the fire catches. Then, with a deep, rushing whoosh, the pyre erupts. Sparks spray upward, and the villagers cheer. The fire's crackle drowns out the forest's quiet. Every face turns orange and alive. You realize the autumn fire isn't just a farewell to summer. It's a battle cry against the cold. The flames aren't symbolic, they're defiance incarnate. The people believe that fire can purify the air, chase away disease, and burn off the spirit frost, the invisible malice that rides in on early winter winds. Historians still argue whether these bonfires were pagan offerings or just elaborate pest control strategies. Knowing humanity, probably both. A man beside you grins, teeth white against his soot-streaked skin. He dares you to jump it, pointing at the edge of the fire. Apparently, leaping across the embers brings luck, if you don't set your cloak on fire. You decline politely, pretending you're too dignified, though honestly it's mostly fear. He laughs, then does it himself, landing with a whoop as sparks scatter. The crowd claps. You realize this whole ritual is equal parts courage and community theater. A few feet away, another group tends to smaller hearths, lighting them from the main blaze.
They'll carry those flames home in clay pots, using them to ignite their own stoves and candles. The logic is simple. If this sacred fire can burn away evil, then every home deserves a spark of it. It's the Iron Age version of a viral trend, fire as divine contagion. One woman throws bundles of dried herbs, rosemary, sage, and what looks like heather, into the flames. The air fills with a sweet, medicinal scent. She mutters that the smoke keeps spirits at bay. Another woman rolls her eyes. Or it keeps the midges away, she says. You get the feeling these two have been debating this every year since birth. As the fire roars higher, the village starts singing. The melody is rough, but full of heart. An old chant that rises and falls like wind through a canyon. You can't understand the words, but you can feel their meaning. A blend of gratitude, grief, and wild hope. Somewhere within the rhythm, a faint drum beats, a hollow log struck with steady hands. Then comes the moment everyone's been waiting for. The old priestess throws a handful of grain into the flames. She says, "For the giants." You blink. Giants? Apparently, in these parts, winter isn't just a season, it's an invasion. Frost giants, in their mythology, march from the north when the earth falls asleep. The fire, she explains, keeps them confused, lost, and maybe even afraid. It's charmingly optimistic. You glance up at the darkening sky. The stars are just beginning to appear, sharp and cold. Somewhere above, the smoke curls into the shape of a twisting serpent. A few people notice it too. They whisper that it's Jörmungandr, the world serpent, waking in his sleep. A good sign, someone says. You're not entirely convinced, but you nod anyway. Hours pass. The heat softens, and embers pulse like veins in the dark. Children chase each other around the ashes, smearing soot on their faces, laughing in the glow. Adults share mugs of something that tastes suspiciously like early beer. You take a sip. Thick, smoky, slightly sour. The kind of drink that could fuel you through a dozen long winters. As the flames die, each family collects a fragment of charred wood and tucks it into a pouch. They'll hang it above their doors or bury it under the threshold to keep the house safe from lightning and misfortune. One man explains that the charcoal remembers the fire. That phrase sticks with you. The idea that even ashes hold memory, warmth, and purpose. In the far distance, wolves begin to howl. Low, mournful, almost melodic. Instead of fear, you feel calm. Somewhere deep inside, the ember of every autumn fire still burns, waiting for the next cold night, the next flicker of courage, the next reminder that warmth is always worth fighting for.
Morning arrives like a sigh, soft, gray, and wrapped in mist. You find yourself walking through a narrow lane bordered by stone walls and thatched roofs. The festival's embers have cooled, and life has settled into quiet rhythm. Somewhere a rooster calls, but even he sounds reluctant. You're in an English village now, centuries after the forest fires of the north. The air smells of damp hay, wood smoke, and something faintly metallic, perhaps the tools of the blacksmith hammering awake in the distance. A child runs past you carrying a hollowed turnip with a candle flickering inside. You recognize it immediately, even though it looks odd. A turnip lantern. This, you realize, is one of the earliest ancestors of the jack-o'-lantern. The boy stops and grins, his face lit from below in a warm orange glow. He's made a crude face on the turnip, triangular eyes, a jagged mouth. It's both funny and faintly eerie. You ask him why he made it, and he shrugs as if it's obvious. "Keeps the wandering souls away," he says, before darting off again toward the fields. The phrase lingers. Wandering souls. That's what people in this era believed October was full of, a kind of spiritual traffic jam between worlds. The harvest had ended, the days grew shorter, and the boundary between the living and the dead supposedly thinned. It wasn't about monsters or costumes, it was about navigation, making sure the lost found their way home without bumping into the living. You follow the boy's path toward the edge of the village where others are gathering. It's the eve of All Hallows' Day, known to these people as Halloween, literally the evening of the holy ones. But the holiness here feels earthy, almost nervous. Villagers set small cakes and bowls of milk by their doors for spirits who might pass through. Candles flicker in every window, not for mood, but for guidance. At the churchyard, the air feels heavier. Bells toll slowly, not mournful, but measured, as though counting footsteps in fog. You see a group of children moving from house to house with small cloth bags. They knock, curtsy, and sing softly. Soul, soul for a soul cake. Pray, good mistress, a soul cake. 1 for Peter, 2 for Paul, 3 for him who made us all. It's hauntingly beautiful, part prayer, part game. Each cake they collect is meant to represent a soul being prayed for, easing its journey through purgatory. You realize, with quiet surprise, that this is trick-or-treating's ancestor. Instead of candy, they're gathering crumbs of mercy. A woman presses one into your hand. It's round, golden, and faintly sweet with nutmeg. "For your dead," she says kindly. You take a bite, and it tastes humble, comforting, like something baked to outlast sorrow. Nearby, you overhear 2 men arguing about whether the dead truly walk tonight. One insists he saw a ghost once near the mill, glimmering like mist. The other laughs. That was just Thomas drunk on cider again. The first man scowls. Then why did the lanterns go out all at once? The second shrugs. Bad oil. They both sip from their mugs and call it a draw. As dusk deepens, more lanterns appear. Hundreds of small, glowing faces carved from turnips and beets. The light trembles across cobblestones like a swarm of fireflies. The effect is mesmerizing, more beautiful than frightening. It's as if the whole village is breathing in rhythm with the night. You spot the boy again, standing at the edge of the road holding his lantern high. "Who's Jack?" you ask him. He grins. "The man who tricked the devil." Then he lowers his voice and tells you the story as if it's secret knowledge. There was once a man named Stingy Jack who invited the devil for a drink, but didn't want to pay for it. So he tricked the devil into turning into a coin. Jack pocketed the coin next to a silver cross, trapping him. Eventually he let the devil go, but only after extracting a promise that his soul would never be taken to hell. When Jack finally died, heaven refused him for his deceit, and hell kept its bargain. So Jack was doomed to wander the earth forever, lighting his way with a single ember carried inside a hollowed turnip. The boy finishes the tale and looks down at his own flickering lantern. "So he walks tonight," he whispers, "and we light these to keep him company." It's a strangely tender thought, that all this light, all these faces carved in root and flame, began as empathy for a lost soul too clever for his own good. You imagine Jack's dim lantern moving across the centuries, passed from hand to hand, until someone replaced the turnip with a pumpkin and called it American tradition. The church bells ring again. Somewhere beyond the hill, mist curls along the ground like a tide of ghosts. The villagers light one last candle and bow their heads. For a brief moment, the night feels perfectly still, a balance between light and dark, past and present, fear and fondness. You realize that what began as survival in the forests has become something softer here, remembrance. The fire that once defied winter now glows gently in a carved root, honoring the warmth of those who came before. You take another bite of the soul cake, and for a heartbeat, you think you can taste every story that came before: smoke, laughter, and a trace of something eternal.
You wake the next evening in a land colder, darker, and quieter than the one before. The wind carries a kind of whisper here, not in words, but in mood. The forest is dense, the earth soft underfoot, and a faint scent of rye bread and wood tar hangs in the air. You're somewhere deep in old Slavic country, long before borders drew neat lines on maps. It's late October again, though the people here don't call it that. To them, this is Jadi, Grandfather's Night, the festival of the dead, a night when the ancestors come home. You walk toward a lonely cottage where a flickering light leaks through the shutters. Inside, a family gathers around a wooden table. The eldest woman, her gray hair tied with red thread, sprinkles breadcrumbs across the floor near the hearth. "For those who can't find their way," she murmurs. Her voice is steady, reverent. Everyone else bows their heads in silence. You crouch beside the window, watching. There's no fear here, just ritual, calm and precise. A bowl of honey sits by the windowsill, a cup of vodka beside it. The fire crackles softly. "They'll be hungry from the road," someone says. You can almost imagine the spirits arriving, not as transparent phantoms, but as invisible guests drawn by the smell of home. Maybe one sits beside the hearth, drying spectral boots. Another hums an old song. The living continue eating, but with quiet respect, leaving a little food on every plate. This is communion before Christianity, a kind of spiritual hospitality that doesn't require priests or theology. Just kindness, bread, and faith that love outlasts flesh. You slip closer as the grandmother hums a lullaby. It's haunting, simple, slow, rising and falling like wind through reeds. She dips her fingers in the honey and touches the doorframe, murmuring a blessing against the cold. "For warmth on the road back," she says. You almost whisper thank you with her, though you don't know who she's speaking to. Outside, faint lanterns glow along the path, not bright enough to scare, only to guide. You follow one, your breath visible in the chill. Down by the edge of the woods, other families have built small fires. Offerings of food and coins rest beside them. A man tosses a splash of vodka into the flames, which flare golden and hiss like laughter. He grins at you and shrugs. "For my grandfather," he says. "He hated wasting good drink, but he'd forgive this." You both watch the sparks float upward into the night, and for a moment it feels like they're being carried somewhere, to someone.
Historians still argue whether Giadi began as ancestor worship or as a harvest rite for the spirit world. Some say it was influenced by Baltic tribes, others by early Slavic shamanism. But honestly, you suspect it started for a much simpler reason: loneliness. People missed the ones who were gone, and this was their way of pretending that love could still fill an empty seat at the table. A nearby child calls out that he's seen something, a pale figure walking among the birch trees. Everyone falls silent. The fire crackles louder. The grandmother rises, squints into the dark, and finally nods. "Just the mist," she says softly, though her eyes glisten. You can't tell if she's comforting the child or herself. A dog starts barking. The boy clutches his mother's skirt. Then, as quickly as it began, the wind shifts, carrying the smell of rain. The moment passes. The grandmother sits again, folding her hands. "They come and go," she whispers. "We just listen." Later, the villagers begin a slow procession toward the graveyard. They carry torches wrapped in waxed cloth to keep the flame steady. You follow, the mud sucking at your boots. At each grave they place food, bits of bread, cheese, apples, sometimes coins. One man leaves a loaf cut in half. When you ask why, he smiles faintly. The dead don't eat much. Somewhere a fiddler starts to play. The tune is soft and strangely hopeful. It's not about mourning, it's about memory. The living sway gently, and the firelight makes their shadows dance among the gravestones. You can't tell which belong to the living and which don't, and maybe that's the point. You notice that no one seems frightened. They speak to the dead as if to old neighbors. They laughed quietly, share gossip, tell the ancestors about the harvest, the births, the quarrels. It's all so normal. You realize that in a world before streetlights and electricity, the supernatural wasn't other. It was simply nearby. When the fires finally burn low, the villagers turn homeward. Each carries a small ember in a clay pot to bring ancestral warmth back into their houses. You do the same, cradling your own tiny flame. It flickers as you walk, threatening to go out, but somehow it holds on. As you pass the last cottage, you see the grandmother again, sitting by her window. She nods at you knowingly, as if recognizing a traveler from another century. "They never really leave," she says. "They just walk slower than we do." Her words stay with you long after the fire fades, long after the honey hardens in the cold. Somewhere beyond the dark forest, a new wind rises, one that will carry these rituals westward, mutating, merging, until only faint echoes remain in Halloween's laughter and candlelight. You look up at the sky. It's starless, vast, and deeply still, like the pause between breaths. You realize that the quiet isn't empty at all. It's full.
The air changes again, warmer now, and heavy with the scent of incense and river mist. You open your eyes to find yourself standing on the banks of a wide, slow-moving river somewhere in southern China. Lanterns shimmer on the surface like drifting stars, each carrying a faint orange glow that wobbles with the current. A soft murmur fills the night. Not speech, exactly, but hundreds of quiet prayers spoken all at once. It's the end of Ghost Month, the last night before the hungry spirits must return to their realm. You're here during the Zhongwen Festival, sometimes called the Ghost Festival, though that name hardly captures its strange beauty. You can feel the air humming with reverence and unease, like the world itself is exhaling after holding its breath all summer. Families kneel by the water, lighting bundles of joss paper shaped like money, shoes, even little paper houses. The flames climb high for a moment, then shrink into glowing ash that floats upward and disappears. A child tosses a small paper boat into the river, its candle trembling. Her mother whispers, "For the ancestors who lost their way." You kneel beside her, watching the boat drift. The wax melts slowly, the flame bends, and for a second you think it might go out, but it steadies. The boat glides away, joining hundreds of others that bob and shimmer down the river's spine. The reflection of so many lights turns the black water to molten gold. There's music in the distance, soft drums, bamboo flutes, and the faint clatter of cymbals. But this isn't a parade, it's more like a lullaby for the dead. The people here believe that during the 7th lunar month, the gates of the afterlife open. Spirits wander among the living, searching for comfort, food, and remembrance. Not all of them are kind, of course. Some are restless, jealous, or simply hungry. That's why offerings are made not just for beloved ancestors, but also for unknown ghosts. The lonely ones, the forgotten ones, the ones no one prays for anymore. You watch an old man burning paper near a shrine. His face is calm, almost content. He notices your curiosity and says, "When you feed the lost, they stop bothering the living." Then he smiles faintly, "And maybe they bless you for it?" Historians still argue whether this festival came from Taoist ritual, Buddhist influence, or something even older, a mixture of peasant superstition and agricultural gratitude. But the truth seems more emotional than theological. You can sense it in the way people move, in how they tend the fire with care. This isn't about fearing ghosts, it's about respecting loneliness. Nearby, a group of monks in saffron robes chant softly. Their voices rise and fall in patterns older than written history. Between verses, you hear the crackle of burning joss paper and the hiss of melting wax. It's hypnotic, a rhythm of letting go. Someone hands you a lantern of your own, delicate and warm in your palms. It's made of rice paper stretched over bamboo, painted with a single character meaning peace. The man nods toward the river. "For whoever you miss," he says simply. You hesitate. There's no one specific you're thinking of, and yet maybe this is for everyone you've ever lost without knowing it. You lower the lantern to the water, and as it drifts away, you feel a faint pull in your chest, like a thread tightening and then slackening again. Further downstream, you see larger boats decorated with paper effigies, sometimes whole temples, houses, even sedan chairs for the dead to travel in comfort. A child laughs as his boat tips, then rights itself. His grandmother pats his head. "Even spirits enjoy a little fun," she says. There's a kind of humor here, the same sort of humanity that's always slipped through these autumn rituals. Just as the Celts once made fires to comfort their ghosts, these families light lanterns so the souls don't get lost on the way home. Different continent, same yearning. To make the darkness a little friendlier. The night deepens and smoke drifts over the water in ghostly ribbons. You catch the scent of sandalwood, wax, and riverweed. It's strangely comforting, as if all the lost souls were exhaling around you, tired but content. A man wades knee-deep into the water to rescue a sinking lantern. When he brings it back, the candle sputters, but doesn't die. He shakes his head and smiles. "Even ghosts need a second chance," he says. You think about that. How fragile and stubborn light can be. How it bends and trembles, but somehow refuses to vanish. Every culture you've passed through has understood this in its own way. Fire, candle, lantern, ember, each a small rebellion against the great quiet of death. As midnight approaches, the monks begin to chant louder. Their voices rise like a wave. Then one by one, the lanterns disappear downstream, swallowed by mist. The fires burn lower. The night returns to its natural silence. Someone claps their hands twice, accustomed to send the spirits back. All around, others follow suit. The sound ripples across the riverbank, crisp and final. You feel the temperature drop slightly, as though the unseen guests have truly gone. The crowd begins to disperse, carrying the soft fatigue that comes after both prayer and relief. You linger a little longer, watching the last flickers fade into the dark. Somewhere in the mist, a frog croaks. A dog barks once, then stops. You breathe in the smoky air, feeling both smaller and strangely comforted. For all the rituals and differences, it always comes down to this: people remembering, not to forget.
The night softens again. When you open your eyes this time, the air is thinner, cooler, scented with pine and ink. You're standing on the edge of a still pond in Heian-era Japan, sometime around the 10th century. Moonlight lies across the surface like polished silver. Crickets sing. Somewhere, a bamboo fountain clicks rhythmically, counting the moments between breaths. You've arrived during Tsukimi, the moon viewing festival. It's autumn, rice harvest season, and tonight the moon is at its brightest, most perfect form. You can see nobles seated on a wooden veranda nearby, their silk robes whispering as they shift. Each holds a fan, a cup of sake, and a small slip of paper for writing poetry. A court musician plucks the strings of a koto, each note soft as falling dew. The guests bow slightly toward the moon before they drink, as if greeting an old friend. You join them quietly, sitting at the edge of the veranda. No one seems surprised that a stranger has appeared. Perhaps, in this silvery light, everyone looks like a visitor from somewhere else. You're handed a cup. Clear rice wine, slightly warm. "For the harvest and for the moon," says the host, a tall man with calm eyes, "and for those who can't be here to see it." His tone suggests he means more than absent friends. He's right, of course. Tsukimi isn't just a celebration of crops or celestial beauty. Beneath its refined surface, there's something older, a quiet reverence for the spirits of the departed, who, it said, dwell within the light of the moon. When the harvest is gathered, people pause to acknowledge not only what they've gained, but what they've lost. In the garden below, servants set out offerings,
round white mochi balls representing the full moon, freshly picked chestnuts, and sprigs of pampas grass tied with red string. The items gleam softly, like pieces of moonlight brought to earth. A child points upward. "Look," she says, "the rabbit is pounding rice again." You glance up and see it, the faint shadow pattern on the lunar surface that Japanese folklore says is a rabbit making mochi. The story goes that a selfless rabbit offered itself as food to a hungry god, who rewarded its sacrifice by placing it forever on the moon. The tale feels fitting, compassion immortalized in light. A gentle laugh rises from the guests. Someone recites a poem aloud. The moon's bright face reflects all who've gone before, soft ghosts in silver. You sip your drink and feel the warmth spreading through your chest, matching the cool glow outside. Everything is slow, deliberate, peaceful. Historians still argue whether tsukimi originated purely from imperial court rituals or if it absorbed earlier Shinto harvest customs. But what's certain is that this night embodies balance, beauty and loss, gratitude and nostalgia, the living and the dead sharing one reflection. The host gestures for a servant to bring more sake. "The moon sees all," he says, quietly, looking out at the pond. "She watches us change, but she never changes herself. Perhaps that's why we find her comforting." You watch the reflection ripple as a breeze drifts across the water. For a heartbeat, the perfect circle shatters, then reforms. It reminds you of the flickering lanterns along China's rivers, the turnip lights in Celtic fields, the fires of Samhain. Different worlds, one shared instinct to honor the unseen by lighting something fragile. You're offered a piece of sweet potato yokon, its glossy surface mirroring the moon. The texture is soft, the flavor earthy and faintly smoky, like autumn distilled into sugar. You chew slowly, listening to the hush between koto notes. Then, from somewhere deeper in the garden, you hear the faint rustle of paper. A young woman kneels before a small wooden shrine. She places a dish of rice and fruit, then lights a thin stick of incense. Her lips move in silent prayer. The smoke curls upward, pale against the dark sky. You step closer, careful not to disturb her. She looks up briefly and smiles. "For my father," she says. "He used to sing when the moon was bright." She glances at the reflection again. Maybe he's singing now. The simplicity of it moves you. No elaborate theology, no fiery sermons, just a daughter whispering into light. A light wind ripples the pond again, scattering the moon's reflection into broken shards. When it settles, you notice your own face beside hers, both superimposed on the lunar glow. It's hard to tell where one reflection ends and the other begins. The nobles resume their poems, the laughter quiet but genuine. The host lifts his cup and says, "To impermanence." Everyone echoes softly, "To impermanence." You look once more at the moon, that eternal lantern watching over countless autumns. The thought crosses your mind that every festival you've wandered through, from Samhain to Dziadi to Ghost Month, has been orbiting this same idea, that death isn't an ending, but a seasonal return. Leaves fall, rivers dim,
spirits visit, and life begins again. The koto fades. Crickets resume their chorus. A servant extinguishes the lamps one by one until only moonlight remains. It spills across the veranda like cool silk, soft enough to dream in. As you drift into that half-sleep between worlds, the moon seems to lower itself closer, its light brushing your face like a quiet hand. Somewhere in the silver silence, a voice, maybe yours, maybe not, whispers, "See you next autumn."
The moonlight fades as you open your eyes again, and suddenly you're surrounded by the smoky chill of medieval Europe. The scent of damp wool, tallow candles, and baked barley hangs in the air. A church bell tolls, slow, deliberate, with that slightly uneven echo you only hear when the metal has been struck by hand. You realize it's All Hallows Tide, the 3-day blur between All Hallows Eve, All Saints' Day, and All Souls' Day, the crossroads where Christianity tried to sanctify what paganism had long held sacred. You walk through a village of mud and wattle cottages, where half the population still clings to old habits, and the other half is pretending to forget them. It's the year 1100, give or take, though time feels slippery here. You pass a thatched roof alehouse where men are arguing, not about theology, but about whose turn it is to refill the jug. A woman carrying a bundle of herbs passes you, muttering something in Latin that clearly isn't Latin. Behind her, a priest in a black robe walks briskly, his candle swinging. He gives her a suspicious look. You can almost hear his inner monologue. "Saints preserve us, it's October again." This uneasy dance between faiths has been going on for generations. The Church says this is a season for solemn prayer, to remember the martyrs, to honor the faithful departed. But the peasants still remember Samhain, even if they now call it All Hallows Eve. They still light fires in the fields, to keep the devil's chill away, as one farmer tells you, though he quickly adds, with the bishop's blessing, of course. At sunset, the villagers gather near the churchyard. Bonfires roar to life, and sparks swirl into the fog. A few people trace crosses in the air. Others toss herbs into the flames for luck. The priest pretends not to notice. He begins to chant the Latin requiem, low, slow, and sonorous, while the villagers hum along tunelessly, blending prayer with superstition. You realize you're watching a compromise disguised as ritual. This is how new traditions are born, not through revolution, but through stubborn coexistence. A man beside you offers a sip from a wooden mug. "For the souls," he says with a wink. The ale is thick and spiced with cinnamon. It warms your throat, and for a moment the night feels kind. Children run between the fires, laughing. They wear crude masks made of cloth and bark, remnants of the old ways when people disguised themselves to confuse wandering spirits. Now the priest says the masks represent penitent souls. No one argues because everyone knows better than to poke the balance too hard. Historians still argue whether this uneasy blending was an act of suppression or adaptation, whether the Church absorbed the pagan festivals to erase them,
or to survive alongside them? The answer, as usual, is probably both. What's clear is that people weren't ready to give up their autumn fire. They just changed the names on it. The night deepens and you drift toward the church. Inside, the walls are damp and the candles flicker against murals of saints, serene, glowing, unbothered. Outside, the wind howls through the thatch, and the villagers' laughter grows louder. The contrast is almost comical. Solemn chants inside, drunken storytelling outside. One man swears he saw a ghost near the mill again. Another insists it was just his wife looking for him after curfew. Laughter erupts. Even the priest smiles a little before catching himself. You step outside again and find the bonfire burning lower, its light now soft and amber. Children toss handfuls of acorns into the coals, making tiny bursts of sparks. For wishes, one girl explains, and for Grandma. There's tenderness in that, the way faith and folklore blur until you can't tell where one ends. You walk toward the edge of the village where the fields open to rolling darkness. Someone has built a smaller fire there, quieter, almost private. An old man sits beside it, his face silvered by moonlight. You sit too, wordlessly. After a while, he speaks. They say the dead hear prayers better when they're warm. You nod. The fire pops softly. I used to be afraid. All those stories, devils, witches, ghosts. But I think they just mean we miss people. That's all religion really is, isn't it? Missing people in a polite way. You smile. He's not wrong. From the church behind you, the final bell tolls. The priest calls out that midnight marks All Saints' Day, the time for solemn remembrance. The villagers respond by tossing another log on the fire, their version of an amen. You realize this night, this festival, is the exact moment when Halloween began to take shape. The ancient fires still burning, but now cloaked in new prayers. Pagan warmth dressed in Christian robes. The world was changing, but it refused to stop glowing. As the embers settle into ash, you hear someone in the dark say, "Same time next year?" Yes, always.
Morning arrives as a faint silver mist, curling over the thatched roofs and stone fences of the medieval village. You hear the low creak of cartwheels, the clatter of hooves on wet earth, and the muffled chorus of early church bells. The air smells of damp hay, wood smoke, and yesterday's beer. Familiar, human, comforting. You wander through the lane, watching villagers sweep the ashes from last night's bonfires. What's left of the fire, the embers, the charred wood, will be scattered across the fields today. Keeps the soil honest, one farmer says. He grins through a missing tooth. You realize this is less about agriculture and more about ritual, a small, defiant way to carry the night's magic into the daylight. Nearby, women hang bundles of herbs from their doors, rosemary for remembrance, sage for safety, and a few sprigs of something unknown that smells faintly like mint and smoke. Every doorway has a different combination, part prayer, part habit. The priest walks past, his robes damp at the hem, and nods to each household. His expression says he disapproves of half of what he sees, But his silence says he's learned to choose his battles. He knows better than to extinguish warmth in a cold season. Today is All Saints' Day, the Church's answer to the chaos of All Hallows' Eve. The people will gather soon, their faces clean, their clothes brushed, their voices quieter than usual. They'll light candles instead of fires, sing hymns instead of drinking songs. But even now, as they prepare for the service, a few children still sneak around in scraps of yesterday's costumes, pretending to be spirits just a little longer. You follow them through the lanes until you reach the small stone church again. Inside, the air is heavy with incense and candlelight. The Latin chants echo softly from the stone arches, and the rhythm of the words feels less like worship and more like breathing. You take a seat at the back, beside an old woman holding a wooden rosary. Her fingers move automatically, each bead polished smooth from decades of use. She notices you watching and whispers, "They used to be bones once. Of saints? Of sinners? Hard to tell which?" You smile faintly, unsure if she's joking. She smiles back, which doesn't help. The priest steps to the altar, his voice rising with solemn gravity. He speaks of purity, of the eternal rest of the faithful. But you notice how people's eyes glaze slightly, not out of boredom, but because their minds are elsewhere. They're thinking of their own dead, fathers, sisters, children, saints in their own way. After the final prayer, the villagers shuffle outside again, blinking in the pale daylight. The priest blesses them with a branch of holy water, and the drops catch the sunlight like tiny sparks. It feels almost like rain, or like the lingering echo of last night's embers. Then, quietly, the day resumes its rhythm. Markets open, chickens scatter, the blacksmith hammers iron. You realize how quickly sacredness folds back into routine. The human world can't stay solemn for long. It always finds a way back to laughter. By late afternoon, the light softens into gold. A group of children follow an old tradition. They go door to door carrying small lanterns carved from turnips, not pumpkins yet. They sing a half-forgotten rhyme about prayers for the dead, trading verses for scraps of bread or sweet buns. The villagers laugh and reward them. It's innocent, humble, but you can already see the outline of something larger forming, the first echo of trick or treat. One boy trips, spilling his lantern. The tiny candle rolls across the ground, flickers, and dies. His friends tease him, and he blushes. But then an old woman stoops, relights it with her own flame, and whispers, "Never let your light go out. The night's longer than it looks." Her voice sounds ancient, older than the church or the language itself. You realize she's carrying something from far deeper, from the bones of older seasons, older gods. The sun dips behind the hills, painting the village in orange haze. A soft chill settles again, the kind that reminds you how thin the line is between comfort and cold. You walk towards the edge of the village, where fields stretch into mist. Farmers finish stacking hay for winter. Children chase crows from the stubble. Everything feels suspended between worlds. Life and death, faith and fear, and somehow that balance feels natural. As you pause at a stone bridge over a narrow stream, you notice the reflection of your surroundings shimmering in the water. The golden light, the curling smoke, the faces of people who have survived another harvest and another winter's approach. It's not grand history, it's quiet endurance, and that's somehow more beautiful. You lean against the stone, watching the ripples blur the reflections. Somewhere in the distance, a new fire crackles, small, almost ceremonial. You realize the cycle never stopped. It only adapted. And that's how Halloween truly survived, not through rebellion, but through resilience. It became whatever people needed it to be: remembrance, protection, mischief, or simply warmth against the chill. You close your eyes and let the faint rhythm of the stream lull you. You can almost hear the past humming softly beneath the present, a harmony between prayer and superstition, church bells and bonfires. Tomorrow will be All Souls' Day, the final act of this 3-day ritual, when prayers will be whispered for every forgotten name, and the living will feel, if only faintly, that they've brushed fingertips with the dead. But for now, in the fading light of All Saints' Day, you feel something quieter, the world breathing together, old and new, sacred and ordinary. All of it, somehow, home.
The morning after All Souls' Day dawns gray and slow, as if the sun itself is hungover from too many prayers. You find yourself in a place far across the sea now, a rough, wind-bitten settlement on the edge of the New World. The year is somewhere in the late 1600s, and the wooden houses of colonial America crouch like tired animals beneath a vast autumn sky. The forest looms at the edge of the clearing, thick and watchful. The settlers whisper that the trees remember things better left forgotten. They came here to build something new, but, as you can tell from the small pumpkins lined up on each stoop and the faint whiff of cider in the air, they brought the old ways with them. It's harvest season, and the whole community is in motion. Barrels thump against wagon beds, corn sheaves lean in golden pyramids, and women laugh as they hang apple slices on strings to dry. A few men test the strength of the cider by taking quality control sips, which, judging by their wobbling, must be very thorough testing indeed. You wander through it all, half ghost, half guest. There's warmth here, but also a tension that hums beneath the laughter. The settlers are devout, Puritans, many of them, and public displays of mirth are officially frowned upon. But people are still people. You can't outlaw the human need for celebration any more than you can tell leaves not to fall. At nightfall, the air grows colder and smells faintly of wood smoke and wet bark. Someone lights a bonfire anyway. For warmth, they insist, though the way they stand around it, hands outstretched, faces glowing, looks suspiciously like reverence. Sparks spiral up toward a fat harvest moon. The children start playing games their parents pretend not to recognize. Apple bobbing, mostly. It came with them from the old country, a Roman echo turned village pastime. The game's simplicity hides its old magic. Apples for Pomona, goddess of fruit and fertility. And yes, they still say that if you bite the first apple, you'll marry within the year. A few parents glance nervously at that, unsure if it's witchcraft or just fun. Historians still argue whether colonial authorities actually punished such games or merely frowned in public and joined in private.
The older folk tell stories too. One man with a beard as thick as a raccoon's tail swears he saw ghost lights wandering the woods last autumn. Another insists those were just swamp gases, but then admits that the lights followed him halfway home. The crowd laughs, nervously. They call it Jack's Lantern, after some forgotten sinner doomed to roam with only a coal for light. You smile, because you know this story will travel. Jack's Lantern will shrink over time, move into pumpkins instead of turnips, and cross centuries to become something brighter, friendlier, safer. But not yet. Later that night, the cider starts working its sleepy magic. Someone produces a fiddle. The tune it follows is lively but low, full of half-remembered reels from across the sea. People dance, stiffly at first, then looser as the fire burns higher. A woman drops her bonnet, a man loses a shoe, and laughter spills like wine. For a moment, the fear of sin evaporates. Then comes the mischief night, or what they call the devil's evening. It's not official, of course. The town elders would disapprove. But every year, as harvest ends, the younger folks can't resist. They tie gates shut, move wagons to rooftops, and replace candles with carved faces just to see who screams first. One prankster hides a turnip lantern in the preacher's pulpit. Another sprinkles flour across a doorway so they can see ghosts' footprints by morning. The laughter is breathless, giddy, the same laughter you've heard at every festival before this one, echoing through time. By dawn, the settlement looks like a confused battlefield of overturned barrels and missing tools, but nobody's truly angry. Mischief, it turns out, is a pressure valve. It lets the dark out gently before it builds into something worse. You help an old woman right her rain barrel. She shakes her head, but smiles. Every year, she mutters, they act like the world's ending. Maybe it is. Maybe that's why we laugh. As the day brightens, the villagers return to their routines, repairing, sweeping, forgiving. You watch as a boy, no more than 10, carves a tiny smiling face into a pumpkin and sets it by the window. He doesn't know why he does it. It just feels right. It's small, harmless, even cute. Yet in that simple act, hollowing out fear, lighting it from within, something ancient shifts and stirs. A tradition from bonfire and graveyard, from apple and spirit, quietly takes new root. You glance toward the woods one last time. A stray leaf drifts across your path, crimson as blood, then vanishes into the stream. Somewhere between the wind and the crackle of distant firewood, you could swear you hear a whisper, not threatening, just amused. It says, "Don't forget us." And you won't. Because that whisper, that mingling of the sacred and the silly, the fearful and the festive, is what will one day become the heartbeat of Halloween itself. The settlers will move west. The children will grow. The old faiths will fade, but the laughter will remain. The stories will remain. The pumpkins will remain. And long after the Puritan walls crumble and the forest swallows their fences, that tiny carved grin will keep glowing against the dark.
The world shifts again, warmer now, richer, humming with drums and incense. You find yourself standing on a sun-baked plateau in what will one day be called Mexico, centuries before the first Spanish sails scar the horizon. The air smells of marigold and smoke, and the horizon trembles with the shimmer of heat. It's late autumn here, too, the dry season. The rains have passed, the harvest is gathered, and the people prepare for something older than any church, older even than the name Halloween. They call it the Feast of the Dead, though no one fears that word. Death is a neighbor, not a thief. You follow a procession winding through the streets of Tenochtitlan, the Aztec capital, a city of canals and stone, floating gardens and obsidian temples. The crowd moves slowly, reverently, but with the energy of celebration, not mourning. Drums thud like heartbeats, shell horns wail. Children scatter petals of the cempasúchil, the sacred marigold whose scent guides the souls of the dead home. At the head of the procession stands a figure painted in white and crimson, a priestess of Mictecacihuatl, the Lady of the Dead. Her legend is both terrifying and tender. She guards the bones of the departed, keeping them safe until the world needs them again. Historians still argue whether she began as a goddess of sacrifice or of rebirth, but to the people here, the distinction doesn't matter. Life and death are the same breath, inhaled and exhaled forever. You walk behind them into the courtyard of a temple adorned with skull motifs, stylized, almost cheerful. The crowd lays offerings at the base: maize, tamales, cacao, obsidian blades, and miniature sculptures of dogs to guide the spirits through the underworld. There's laughter here, and music. Someone passes you a cup of fermented agave. It burns sweetly down your throat. The priestess raises her arms, and the crowd hushes. Smoke curls upward, thick and gray, carrying prayers into the bright sky. Her chant is slow and rhythmic, and though you can't understand the words, the tone is unmistakable. Gratitude, remembrance, and a kind of fearless intimacy with death. Then the drumming resumes, low at first, then growing until the air itself vibrates. Dancers painted as skeletons twirl and stomp, their ankle bells rattling. It should be macabre, but it isn't. It's joyous, a reminder that even the dead can dance. Later, as dusk deepens, the families return to their homes. You follow one, a humble adobe house near the canal. They lay food on a small altar: tortillas, fruit, a clay bowl of beans, and a figure carved of maize dough. A woman lights a candle, murmuring softly, "Come, eat with us, my mother." It's a small act, but the air shifts. You swear the shadows move differently now, not darker, just fuller. The night fills with music, chatter, the clinking of cups. Children fall asleep in hammocks, surrounded by candlelight. You sit quietly by the altar, listening to the faint rustle of unseen guests. Somewhere nearby, a dog barks once, then stops, as if recognizing someone it cannot see. A gentle breeze carries the scent of copal resin. It's sweet and haunting. You realize this ritual, this conversation with the dead, isn't about fear or appeasement. It's about continuity. No sharp line divides the living from the departed here. They are simply neighbors, separated by a thin wall of smoke and memory. You think back to all the other places you've been tonight: Celtic hills, Roman orchards, alpine valleys, Puritan clearings. Every culture has tried to name this feeling, this bridge between worlds in its own tongue. The Aztecs just happened to embrace it openly, without shame or superstition. Some scholars say this ceremony may have influenced the later Dia de los Muertos, when the Spanish tried to fuse Christian All Souls observances with indigenous remembrance. Others say it's older than any imported faith.
that the souls here would have found their way home regardless of what calendar hung on the wall. Historians still argue whether the modern festival owes more to European saints or Aztec gods. But you, sitting here in the flicker of marigold and firelight, know the truth lies somewhere beautifully in between. A child stirs beside you and opens her eyes. She points to the candle flame and whispers, "Look, she's here." You glance, and for an instant, the smoke seems to form the outline of a woman's face, peaceful, smiling. Then it's gone, like breath on glass. Later, when the fire burns low, the woman of the house collects the candle stubs and flower petals. She tosses them into the canal, and the water glows faintly in the moonlight. "They'll find their way back," she says, almost to herself. You stand by the canal's edge, the city lights reflected like constellations in the black water. In that stillness, it's easy to imagine the veil between worlds as a ripple, one moment transparent, the next shimmering with memory. As you turn away, you notice something small and familiar. A child carving a smiling face into a gourd and placing a candle inside. The grin glows wide and warm, eerily like the ones that will one day shine on Halloween nights. Different land, different gods, same instinct. To light the dark, to laugh at death, to keep the memory of warmth alive. The drums fade into the distance. You walk on through centuries of dust and smoke, following the steady pulse of humanity. A rhythm that has never really stopped.
Time stretches forward, folding centuries like thin paper. The sound of drums fades, replaced by the tick of a clock and the low hum of gas lamps. You open your eyes in a velvet-curtained London parlor, sometime around 1890, the age of top hats, telegrams, and an oddly fashionable fascination with ghosts. A fire crackles in the hearth, throwing amber light across lace doilies and polished mahogany. Outside, a fog presses against the windows like an eager listener. Inside, 6 people sit around a circular table, fingertips lightly touching. The air smells of beeswax, perfume, and just a hint of nervous sweat. You've arrived in the heart of Victorian spiritualism, where death is no longer a grim inevitability, it's a social event. People pay good money for a chance to chat with the dearly departed between courses of sponge cake and cucumber sandwiches. "Is anyone here with us tonight?" asks the hostess, her voice tremulous but thrilled. She's dressed in black silk, morning chic, though you suspect the diamonds on her wrist cost more than sincerity. The medium beside him closes his eyes, dramatically. He's a thin man with an immaculate mustache and the weary expression of someone who's seen too much candlelight and not enough truth. The table quivers. Somewhere in the room, a bell tinkles. Someone gasps. You watch as the curtains rustle despite the still air. A soft thump echoes from beneath the table. The medium murmurs, "He is here." You resist the urge to peek, but then curiosity wins. You lean forward just enough to glimpse a hidden wire tied to his ankle. Ah, so the dead have a sense of humor, and it's profitable. Still, nobody seems to care. They want to believe. Victorians, after all, live in a world of contradictions, scientific progress and deep superstition, rigid etiquette and repressed longing. The afterlife for them is the ultimate loophole, a polite rebellion against the tyranny of mortality. Someone's teacup rattles. A candle flickers blue. The hostess whispers, "Is it you, Mother?" The medium hums low, eyes rolling back for effect. A deep voice, utterly unlike his own, answers from the shadows. "I am always near." The hostess bursts into tears. You feel the chill too, not because of spirits, but because grief is contagious. It fills the room like cold perfume. The séance continues, alternating between sincerity and subtle stagecraft. A chair creaks mysteriously. The butler's doing, you suspect. A photograph slides off the mantel. Gasps. Applause. A shilling well spent. Historians still argue whether spiritualism was a scam or a genuine comfort movement. Probably both. It flourished in a time when death was everywhere. Cholera, consumption, and the industrial city itself turning lungs to soot. When loss is constant, belief becomes oxygen. You drift among the guests, listening. One man insists he saw his late brother's face in the mirror last week. A woman claims her dog barks only to invisible visitors. Someone else mutters that the new invention, the photographic plate, can capture ghosts. You chuckle softly. That will endure. A century later, people will still squint at grainy shapes and whisper, "Look, a spirit." The medium, satisfied with tonight's spectacle, declares the session ended. The guests relax, exhaling their collected fear. They sip tea again, as if nothing uncanny just happened. One man jokes about the ghost of overbrewed Darjeeling, earning polite laughter. You notice how easily they transition between the absurd and the sacred. Humans always have. As the crowd disperses, you linger near the fireplace. The flames twist and pop, and for a moment, one spark leaps upward like a tiny soul. You remember all the other fires, the Celtic ones, the Germanic ones, the colonial bonfires. This one burns cleaner, more civilized, but the purpose is the same. Light against the long night. A woman stays behind, gazing into the embers. "I don't care if it's real," she whispers. "It feels real." You nod, unseen. That's the truth of it. Faith isn't about proof. It's about warmth. Later that night, you follow the London fog through narrow lanes. Behind curtains, more séances flicker. Parlors glow like jack-o'-lanterns, safe bubbles of candlelight in a sea of soot and superstition. The Victorians have no idea they're midwives to a modern myth. Their candlelit circles, their fascination with the afterlife, their love of theatrical fear, all of it will bleed quietly into the bones of Halloween as it travels through time. The press will mock them, of course. "Table turners and spirit dupes," the headlines will cry. But the stories will stick. Writers like Arthur Conan Doyle and Charles Dickens will turn ghostly visitation into household entertainment. And somewhere in America, cheap paper masks and skeleton postcards will start selling by the thousands each October. Halloween is being reborn again, in parlors and print shops, through candle smoke and clever marketing. The old rituals of fire and bone are now dressed in lace and manners. The dead still visit, but now they knock politely and leave calling cards. You smile as you walk the gaslit streets, hearing laughter from behind doors. A boy in a newscap startles at a shadow, then laughs at himself. Somewhere a phonograph crackles with a haunting tune. Even in the most rational century, people still crave a little magic, just enough to make them shiver, but not enough to lose sleep. And that, you realize, is the secret ingredient that's been simmering through every festival you've wandered. The need to dance with darkness, not defeat it. You turn a corner and the fog parts. Ahead, a single jack-o'-lantern glows in a window. A pumpkin, not a turnip this time. Orange light flickers across glass, soft and steady. You pause, smiling. Halloween has found its modern face.
You open your eyes again, and this time the air smells faintly of wood smoke and rain on concrete. The century has shifted once more. Cars hum in the distance, porch lights flicker on, and 100,000 tiny pumpkins glow across suburban streets. You're standing in the present day, the eve of Halloween, though it hardly feels ancient anymore. Children chatter in bright costumes, plastic skeletons wave from lawns, and supermarket ghosts flutter in the wind like cheerful litter. Yet beneath all the sugar and spectacle, you can still feel it, the pulse. The same rhythm that echoed through Celtic fires, Roman orchards, and Aztec altars hums softly here too. Every flickering candle, every orange porch light, every laughing ghost is a descendant of something sacred. You stroll down the quiet end of a cul-de-sac, where one house hasn't gone overboard with decorations. A modest jack-o'-lantern sits by the steps, its grin uneven but sincere. Someone inside is baking something. Cinnamon, nutmeg, maybe apple pie. You realize you've come full circle, the season of harvest, the warmth before the long dark. A light rain begins to fall. The street glistens. Somewhere, a child's laughter turns into a squeal as a puddle proves deeper than expected. Their parents laugh too, unbothered. It's a tiny echo of ancient joy, messy, fleeting, human. You pass a group of teenagers pretending not to care while clearly having the time of their lives. One wears vampire fangs, another a cardboard knight's helmet. They don't know it, but they're reenacting stories older than any nation. The eternal play of light and dark, of fear worn lightly on the body. Further on, an old man sits on his porch, handing out candy from a chipped ceramic bowl. He hums tunelessly, eyes soft with memory. For a moment, you could swear you see the reflection of a younger face behind him, like a ghost of his own childhood. Maybe he sees it too, because he smiles and whispers, "You came back." You stop walking. The wind shifts, carrying the scent of wet leaves and far-off bonfires. Somewhere, maybe a few miles away, someone's burning a pile of branches, just like their ancestors did. Fire against the chill, light against the dark. You think about all the names the season has worn. Samhain, Pominalia, All-Hallowed-Tide, Dziadi, Ghost Month, Day of the Dead. So many languages, so many ways to say the same thing. We remember. We honor. We laugh in the face of endings. Historians still argue whether Halloween is pagan, Christian, or purely commercial. They debate its true origins, its authenticity, its dilution. But out here on this damp suburban street, it doesn't really matter. It's still the same impulse, to make meaning of mortality, to find beauty in the fading light, to connect with the unseen and the remembered. You look up. The clouds part briefly, revealing a cold silver moon. For just a moment, everything goes still. The wind, the laughter, even the hum of traffic. It's as if the world takes a slow, reverent breath. And in that silence, you can almost hear them.
the echoes of all those ancient festivals layered atop one another, like transparent film, Celtic chants, Roman songs, Aztec drums, Victorian gasps, children's giggles, a chorus stretching across millennia, humming the same refrain, "We are still here." You reach the edge of the neighborhood, where the houses thin out and the land opens into a patch of empty field. A single bonfire crackles there, small but steady. A group of friends sits around it, wrapped in blankets, telling ghost stories between sips of cider. Their faces glow orange, their laughter soft and sleepy. You draw closer, just enough to feel the heat on your face. The fire's light dances in your eyes, and for an instant you see other fires burning behind it. The flicker of druid torches, the shimmer of lanterns by alpine roads, the blaze of Viking pyres, the candlelight on Aztec canals. All the old flames, still alive in this modest modern ember. You realize something simple, something quiet. Humanity never stopped making peace with the dark. We just changed the costumes. The wind rises again, scattering leaves like tiny rust-colored spirits. One drifts past your hand, weightless. You let it go. And as the night deepens, the fire crackles, the voices soften, and the world exhales. You stand there a moment longer, one soul among billions, listening to the same whisper carried through time. It says, "Remember us, but also rest." You smile, close your eyes, and let the warmth sink in. Now the fire fades to embers, and the voices slip into drowsy murmurs. The night is no longer cold, just cool enough to make the blanket of quiet feel welcome. You sit there, breathing slow, watching the last sparks drift upward like tiny orange stars. Everything around you feels softened, hushed. The boundaries between centuries dissolve, between you and them, between the living and the gone. You can almost sense the weight of all those shared Octobers pressing gently around you. A comfort, not a burden. You think about how far you've traveled tonight, through time, through rituals, through the strange persistence of human hope. Every culture, every age has found its own way to honor what passes and protect what remains. Maybe that's what Halloween really is. Not fear, not even fun, but a reminder that we're still connected to something vast and endlessly repeating. The wind brushes your face like a sigh. The fire makes one last pop. You close your eyes, letting the rhythm of the night slow your heartbeat until it matches the gentle pulse of the earth beneath you. Tomorrow will bring light again, and noise and laughter. But for now, the quiet belongs to you. Let it settle over your thoughts like a blanket. Let your breathing grow easy, steady. The dead are remembered, the living are safe, and the world, for this brief moment, feels perfectly balanced. Sleep comes softly now, the way it always does, not as an ending, but as another small beginning in the long, looping story of us all.